I was provided a review copy from Techland for this video. This review will be mostly spoiler free. I won't discuss story details, and I've done my best to obfuscate specific narrative points in the gameplay. We've been hearing about Dying Light 2 since E3 2018. That's 4 years ago. After the original game knocked it out of the park in 2015, developer Techland finally showed that their zombie survival concept, originally seen in 2011's Dead Island, was ready for prime time. Turns out, all it needed was the addition of one of the best parkour systems in a first-person shooter. Oh, and a lot less jank too, I guess. And now they're out to show that that idea can still bear fruit. Yes, Dying Light 2 has seen quite a few delays since its announcement, and I'm sure a lot of people were concerned it may never had seen the light of day at all. Especially with what happened to Techland's own Hell Raid and the sequel to Dead Island, albeit the latter being from a different developer. Now, I loved the original Dying Light. It really clicked with me, and I've put a lot of hours into it over the years. So I've been looking forward to the sequel since the day it was announced. But now it's here. Was it worth the wait? Is it the story-driven, melee parkour zombie survival horror game we were all hoping it would be? Well, a little no, but mostly hell yes. So, if you're wondering why this review didn't go live when all the others did, it's because I received my code late. Really late. In fact, the embargo dropped less than 48 hours after it landed in my inbox. While that obviously comes with some negative implications for my channel, it does bring some silver linings in the fact that I can gauge what the general consensus is on the game from other outlets, and perhaps address some of the main concerns that they've had and what my thoughts are on those concerns. It also lets me play with the day one patch and game-ready GPU drivers, so I can assess performance and its technical state, hopefully truer to what you would experience rather than just playing it on pre-release. So, on that note, let's begin. And for reference, I'm running this on PC using Windows 11 with an AMD Ryzen 9 3900X and NVIDIA RTX 3070. Dying Light 2 has been rock solid for me, with only one crash in my entire playthrough. There have been a few bugs, but these are so minor that I really wouldn't have mentioned it, if not for the fact that a lot of other outlets are reporting quite a buggy experience. The extent of my issues have been limited to the odd NPC clipping through the environment or another character, and the camera occasionally doing the same through walls. Oh, and a single time I was caught in some objects and couldn't move. But that's it. For me, this has really been one of the smoothest big game launches in a while. Now, performance. Initially, the game ran like arse, and I was a little concerned. But it turns out that that was due to a couple of factors which I was able to solve. The first was the fact that DLSS was not enabled early on, despite it saying so in the menu. This meant that any sort of ray tracing would absolutely crush my performance, and that, coupled with a bug that wouldn't let me turn off ray tracing, led to a pretty rough time. What I can say now is that with both of those issues resolved, it runs flawlessly. At 1440p with everything maxed, DLSS center quality and ray tracing off, it's been buttery smooth. I don't have an exact FPS number for you, but if I'd had to guess, I'd say it's hovering around the 100 to 120 mark. And yeah, look, I could have ray tracing on if I wanted and have it still be pretty smooth, but it cuts the FPS nearly in half, and for a game like this, I would much prefer the smooth performance rather than a slight graphical improvement. But that's not to say the game doesn't look great. In fact, that couldn't be further from the truth, because I think this is one of the best looking games I've played, period. The lighting is fantastic, and the environments of Old Villador and Central City are varied and they look excellent. It's held up by an inviting, but more importantly, diverse colour palette that's a welcome change from the original game's abundance of browns and oranges. Often I was just in awe of what I was looking at. When you scale a building or get outside after being in darkness for a while, some of the sights are just amazing. Incredible draw distances, beautiful sunrises. There are certainly times where I've just stopped to smell the roses, so to speak, and just take it all in. But it would be nothing without its inhabitants, zombies, bandits, civilians, and soldiers alike. Dying Light 2 is a very character-focused game, and you'll spend a big chunk of the game just talking to people. hearing what they have to say, accepting missions from them, and listening in over other people's interactions and conversations. Now, there are quite a few outlets out there saying that the story here is bad, and that the characters don't really seem like real people. And I'm inclined to agree, to an extent. For a game with such a big focus on dialogue and narrative, it falls flat to what I was hoping for. Something Techland made a big fuss about before launch was the game's level of player choice in terms of story decisions and progression. There is certainly the illusion of that, but ultimately it's a little shallow. There are diverging paths, but usually they're on a macro level, with most seeing an eventual return to the middle with an inevitable string of events no matter your choice. There are some exceptions of course, as there are several endings to the story, but still it's a bit disappointing. The main story isn't anything special narratively either, and to be honest it's a little incohesive and all over the place, with far too many do this tangential job for me, then I'll give you your next map marker situations. The actual character interactions throughout are what I really enjoyed. The quiet times just talking, learning about them, and subsequently taking on missions and going up against it alongside them was quite compelling for me. I can't say the same about the side quests though. These feel like the opposite, with cardboard cutout humans ready to give you some random mission, then pay your reward. And I mean, it's fine, they serve their purpose, but don't expect Witcher 3 or even Skyrim levels of side content here. But the fact there's so many of them, scattered throughout the world, on rooftops, in safe zones and outposts, heck sometimes even just randomly on the street, makes this world feel alive, like it could exist without you in it. Little details make all the difference, like how shopkeepers just do their own thing when you approach, only to turn and offer you their services when you interact with them. Or how when walking around safe zones you'll see people tending to crops, having a drink at the bar, or just chatting with one another. Before we move on, let's briefly talk about the game's protagonist, Aiden. Coming off Crane being quite bland in Dying Light 1, I was certainly hoping for a more engaging main character in the sequel. Unfortunately though, my wishes have been left unanswered, mostly. To the game's credit, it does try and give Aiden a mysterious backstory, but it's just not that interesting, and it's also delivered poorly with stale and boring flashbacks. It's not really any better in the present either. Aiden doesn't really have any drives or personality traits other than complete overarching story and get to the reason I'm here. So it's hard to get invested in his plight. I get that he's meant to act as someone to project yourself onto somewhat, but ultimately the story is about him, so this part of the game is certainly lacking. It's a shame because there are moments where some personality shines through, with hints of real emotion in moments where I was on board with what he was saying and how I imagined he was feeling. But they're too few and far between to make up for all those shortcomings. You know what isn't a shortcoming though? Basically every aspect of Dying Light 2's gameplay. Like that segue? I thought it was okay. Let's start with parkour. This is absolutely the best parkour system in any game I've ever played. Mirror's Edge, Assassin's Creed, Dying Light 1, name it, anything. It could honestly be its own game. The sheer thrill of running through the world, leaping across rooftops, scaling skyscrapers, performing these insane moves is on a complete other level. And the progression curve is really satisfying thanks to all the skills you unlock as you level up your parkour abilities. While at the start of the game you have about as few abilities and as much stamina as a teenager who just ate too many cheeseburgers, the more hours you put in, the more you will improve, allowing many more options to traverse, interact, and fight in the world. Like gaining the ability to wall run, run up vertical surfaces, dive kick enemies, and so many more. Throughout your time in the world you'll also find parkour challenges, which I found myself just running repeatedly over and over again to get that perfect score. The mechanics are just so tight and the skill ceiling is massive. The feeling of sprinting and leaping between buildings, timing the perfect jump, landing in the right spot, and hearing the music crest as you clench your entire body on a massive leap is just pure enjoyment. Rarely did I feel that any mistake was anything other than my own stuff up. Aiden always did what I told him to do, and if I missed a jump and became a stain on the pavement, that's on me. I think it's a testament to the enjoyment of moving through Dying Light 2's world that when I got an objective marker 700 meters away, I was excited about how I was going to get there, and what I might encounter on the way. While most people would say Dying Light 2 is a zombie game, I'd say it's really more of a parkour game than anything else. And playing second fiddle to that is a melee combat game lying underneath. It's still great, but compared to the movement system, it's not quite as impressive. The main thing that comes to mind for me when I think about it is satisfaction. because the mechanics are quite simple and the enemy variety, especially for the humans, isn't that varied. Plus, once you've mastered the art of dodging, relocating, and utilising a few key abilities like the dive kick, combat with both zombies and humans is fairly easy unless you're really getting swarmed. What stops it from becoming a snooze fest though is the variety in terms of weapons, abilities, and the environments that you fight in. And using all these elements together, like I said, is really, really satisfying. You feel like an absolute weapon, an unstoppable force, and perhaps more importantly, like you're really good at the game. Whether it was a perfect dodge leading into a headshot, igniting 5 guys with a fire blast from an axe, nailing a zombie with a throwing spear, or tackling someone off a freaking building, I couldn't go 5 minutes without doing something awesome and just finding a massive grin on my face. Dying Light 2 has the most impactful day-night cycle I've experienced. It's almost 2 different games. In the day, you are the master. You're decimating any unfortunate zombies that get in your way, with most being these crusty inconveniences who've spent too long in the sun. They stumble around and they won't cause you too many troubles unless you're caught in the middle of a large group. But at night, the tables turn. Once the sun sets, zombies that hibernate indoors flood out onto the streets, and the more powerful undead terrors become much more prevalent. There's basically no way you'd win in a straight fight. There's just too many of them and they'll just keep coming. So speed and evasiveness are key. But the benefit to heading out at night is that indoors becomes a lot safer, so there are tons of opportunities for good loot and rare upgrades. Plus, you'll get bonuses just for doing stuff at night thanks to the extra risk. It's so much riskier that I always found myself watching the clock, constantly aware of how long I had until nightfall. I never found myself out at night by accident. It was always with intent, and that almost expeditionary feeling is something I really loved. Going out at night is always filled with tense moments, like when you venture into GRE dark zones, for example. These massive buildings house all important upgrades, crystals, and rare crafting materials, but they're also teeming with undead, virals, and exposed toxic chemicals. It's super tense as you get deeper and deeper into the building, and the experience of being seen and having to remember where the exit is and sprint your way there with zombies on your tail is just perfect. Or when you're moving through the city and you miss a jump, finding yourself surrounded in the middle of the street with your sole thought being, how do I get out of this? Add to this the fact that you've got your own infected countdown timer to turning into a zombie, only refillable by being under UV light, and it's rare that you'll have a minute at night that isn't stressful in some way or another. But it's the good kind of stress, the addictive kind, that will leave you wanting more as soon as you put the game down. As you explore the world, you'll be populating your map with things to do, finding quest givers, loot spots, locations of interest, etc. With many open world games of the past, the sheer number of things that there are for you to do can be overwhelming. This is a major complaint at Ubisoft's open world titles like Assassin's Creed and Far Cry. But unlike those examples, it feels different here because of the rewards given and how it's really up to you whether you complete any of them. There's basically no level gating to speak of, so if you want to skip past all the open world nonsense and just play the story, you can. But if you do decide to help the denizens of Dying Light 2, fight mini-bosses, loot high-value areas, or scale windmills to establish safe zones, you'll be handsomely rewarded. And because the gameplay loops are so inherently fun, none of it feels like busy work or classic open world BS. Even the simple act of looting is satisfying. Nothing is really useless, so it's always worth your while to crack into that safe, pick the lock on a chest, or kick open a container to see what's inside. The sense of progression is great, and the simple power fantasy of upgrading or buying new weapons, equipment, and gear, and seeing number go big is very satisfying. But all this stuff is secondary to the core gameplay. There'd just be nothing without it. The best times I've had in Dying Light 2 were just exploring and finding something to do, helping people, creeping through a dark zone, assaulting a bandit camp, or just exploring a building and finding an old world newspaper. Just those random encounters is something I really enjoyed. I could just do what and go where I wanted, and the whole time be reveling in the parkour and combat systems that I honestly don't know if I will ever get bored of. Dying Light 2 is a bloody fantastic game, and it's nearly everything I've been hoping for since its announcement 4 years ago. There's just so much to do, but none of it feels like a waste of your time. And even with all the stuff I mentioned, there's so much more I haven't had time to talk about. But you'll never regret taking up a quest, because the gameplay surrounding it is good enough to support even the blandest story arc or uninspired mission. If you're wanting to play on console though, I'd say check out some more opinions on whether the version on your box of choice is stable and runs well. I can only speak to what I've experienced, and for me on PC, it's been a nearly flawless technical and visual experience. Dying Light 2 is the most fun I've had on a new release for quite a while, and based on Techland's history of supporting the first game for over 6 years, I think it's a game that's going to get better with age and provide hours of enjoyment for years to come. Dying Light 2 is available now, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what I do here, please hit subscribe, like the video, and hit the notification bell. And if you'd like to support me further, consider becoming a member here on YouTube or over on Patreon. Big thanks to those already doing so: T Edits, Crispy Robo Chicken, Overlord Jeebus, Alan, David DeBolye, Crizzy218, Dekayo, and Standby for Systems Nominal, who supports me at the Paladin tier. Thank you very much. See you again for a new video very soon, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next time.